Morning. Welcome to Let's Get Growing. We're in the greenhouse today. It's a beautiful January day. We're going to be looking at some succulent propagation that will carry over to the cactus as well. We had a question the other day about how to manage an old columnar cactus, and when I got the pictures of them, it was obvious that you can see something that happens quite regularly with columnar cactus, columnar succulents, and makes it difficult to manage them well, to keep them looking good, to keep them standing up. So we're going to address it today. I have a couple of examples that I think will be helpful to show. We've got two different euphorbias here, and often we see them referred to as cacti, but they're not. But the principles are exactly the same. We've got this Euphorbia trigona here, right here, sometimes called a milk cactus. We've got a Euphorbia mammillaris here, sometimes called a corn cob. But the principles are going to be exactly the same on how to deal with this problem of columnar cactus and succulents when they get big and have had over their lifetime little areas of not great growth, a little bit of mismanagement maybe. It's very, very common, especially when you're growing from seed. Even though a lot of these are not grown from seed, but people will often get a seedling, a young cactus, 3-inch pot, they grow it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and years later they're in a 10-inch pot and it's 4 feet tall and it's falling over, they don't know what to do with it. So we're going to look at how to fix those. And I'm using this Euphorbia because I happen to have it here in the greenhouse, and it's showing a little bit of those issues. So I bought this plant as a crested Euphorbia lactea. That's this part here. You can see crests happen when something happens to the growing tip. With succulents and cacti, it's quite a desirable trait, a neat mutation, because the growth habit's very different. But you do need to be careful of reversion, and that's what's happened here. So we've got these great normal shoots that have reverted like crazy. Now the problem is that when these start growing, you will get points of growth when they weren't fed well, light levels were low, they just weren't in the best conditions for growth. And what happens is you get these little narrow areas. So you can see we've got a nice big clumpy area. This part was growing probably through the summer in a nice full sun area, so it's got good size, it's sturdy all the way around. And then it grew in an area in a time where light was low, or nutrient levels were low, and you get these skinny, weak areas. And this happens with columnar cacti all the time. You get a period of growth where conditions weren't ideal, and then you get weak spots here. So the only real way to fix these is to take a cutting of the good part of the plant. Now you can see we had this weak part of growth. Then we've got a much better, stronger section of growth here. On this one wasn't so bad, but again, about the same time as this grew, this side was growing too. And you can see we've got a bit of an indent here. And then some really good growth up here. if you follow it down, you can see there's one there, there's one there, there's even a little bit of one here. So you can see that's gone through 3 bouts of either low light, low water, low nutrient, whatever. That as this gets taller, and this could get 6 or 7 feet tall, but you're always going to have weak points there. They never fix themselves. So what you need to do to regenerate these plants is to take cuttings of them and reroot the top good growth. So where you do that is you utilize that weak space right there because it's narrow, and we're going to take right there, and we're going to reroot this top good sturdy piece. Cactus growers do this all the time. In California, you know, when you're buying a pot of a big cactus, they'll take pieces like that are 3 and 4 feet tall, cut them off and root them. You know, they don't wait for a 10-inch cactus to grow for 10 or 15 years before they sell it. They're chopping pieces off mature plants and rooting them, and that's what you're buying. So it makes it a lot quicker, but it's very easy to do. So I'm going to show you on this one, and then I'm going to illustrate it a bit more on this Euphorbia mammillaris, so give you another idea on how to do it. Why I've put gloves on. Euphorbias, when I cut it, you'll see they are full of white latex sap. It's not toxic per se, but it can be very irritating to people, to your skin. If you get it in your eyes, it can be really problematic. So you do need to be careful when you're dealing with the Euphorbia family. They all have that white latex in them, so you need to be careful. So what we're going to do, I'm going to show you easily right now on this guy, then I'll talk a little bit more about how I'm going to fix this plant. Fortunately, Euphorbia spines aren't terribly hard, but we're still going to wrap it in a nice tea towel. Cacti are the same. Get something you can hold on to. Euphorbias, you need to be a bit more careful because every time you break a spine or cut it, you're going to have the white sap, and it's kind of nasty. So we're going to cut just around this thin, narrow point because that's a good place to take a cutting from. So we got a good sharp knife here. We're going to cut straight through, and we're going to come out the other side. Very simple, but you can see now, there's the white latex that's dripping. You need to be very careful you don't get this on your skin if you have sensitive skin or have a latex allergy. You definitely don't want to get it on your fingers and get it in your eyes. It can be quite painful. Then it's sticky. So there's our cutting there. Now you can see that when we root this, it's not going to have a weak spot in it anymore. But we're not going to root it for a while. What we have to do with succulents, especially when we make big cuts like this, is we need to let this dry and callus over. If we just take this, stick it on soil, we run a huge risk of rotting this whole cutting. So we don't want that to happen. So we're going to let it sit for about a week or so. We're going to let it dry well. Then we're going to leave it so it's upright. I had brought this pot, might be too big for it. You just need to have something to keep it upright. You don't want to lay it like this. If you lay it like that for a couple of weeks, what happens is the growing tip here is going to start to turn. We don't want that to happen. We want our cuttings to be upright and good, so you could just sit it in an empty pot like that, and we're going to sit it and let it dry. Now, from a making more plant standpoint, it's kind of fun because what's going to happen here is it's going to dry here as well. That's going to callus over. But as the next growing season starts, this stem is going to send off all sorts of babies from here. And as those babies grow, we can then take those as cuttings and root up a bunch more plants. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. But I got this plant because I wanted the crested parts. Now you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 good crested parts here, but we've got a lot of reversion from the straight stems. So I don't really want the straight stems on this plant, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the areas that are very nicely crested, and I'm going to cut them off and reroot them. So we've got this nice little crest here at the bottom. I think we'll do the same thing. I can probably grab this one like this. We're going to get into a narrow spot. And we're going to ever so gently take off our crested piece. So there we go. We've got our crested piece now. And again, we're going to let this sit for a week or two so it calluses over well before we stick it as a cutting. So we're just going to let it sit like that. It's going to sit in a sunny spot. And what we'll do is we'll go through and we'll take all the cuttings off this that we want and root up our crested spot. There's a beautiful crest right here. I'd love to have that one as a specimen on its own. And again, you're going to get branching from here. So you're going to get lots of babies off this plant as it grows.
Now, Jeff, I have a question.
Yeah?
Once you've cut off the crested cuttings, if you leave it, will it further crest the adult plant?
Most likely. We had a nice spot here that is very normal looking. So odds are the crest won't be there anymore. Because we've taken off that one growing tip that had the crest. like this one here. This one actually has a couple of different growing heads. So you might, you could, if you were able to split that, don't you stay away from it. If you're able to split that, you might get 2 crested head pieces. But this one here, because it's big and it's split here, you might get 2 crested head pieces off of that. So we'll set it aside. Then we're going to look at the Euphorbia mammillaris because it's showing the same things. Now this one grows a little quicker, so it's a little more obvious in many cases. Some of these stems here, look at these stems. This one here in particular was growing really well. Again, it had a period of growth where the light was very low. So this will happen indoors quite often, especially if you move your cacti inside and outside and they do some growing indoors. This is where this can happen. So you've got this narrow bit here. That's never going to fix. So if you wanted to correct that now, you could just simply take that top bit as a cutting, like we did with the big one, reroot that. It's going to grow up like this and be good plant. Also going to branch off of this cut spot. Now, when you get into a multi-branch plant like this, if you've got good shoots, you always want to look for the narrowest point to take your cuttings from. So ideally, we would look to an area like this. So here, we took our tip cutting off this part a couple of seasons ago, right here. You can see where the scar is from the leaf, from the tip cutting. That was just, we just took a simple tip cutting, just like this one here. Took it off there. We're going to get a nice plant, and then it's going to branch, and this is what it's going to do. If you've got good growth and you don't have those narrow bits, the ideal place to take the cutting from, especially on a Euphorbia, but really on any succulent, would be the narrowest point. And the narrowest point on these guys is where they connect. Now, I don't have one that is short enough and full enough to make a really good plant, but I'll just give you the idea. So we've got a place where a cutting was taken from. We've got two shoots here that have a very narrow connecting point. So ideally, you take your cuttings there. Why do you do that? Because it's a very small cut, much less chance for disease to get in there. It heals over very quickly, and then you can root that cutting. But again, we have our little low light problem. So if you've got good growths, they're plump, sturdy, you take your cutting at the very narrowest point, causes the least amount of issues for your plant and for the cutting itself. Now at this time of the year, when we're itching to get into, look at this, you see what I mean by the latex from these Euphorbias. It can be everywhere. Not nice. As I was looking for stuff to talk about here, I came across this jade plant, which from this side looks kind of okay. But if you turn him around, you'll see he had a little bit of a problem. He was very dry, and he got top heavy, and he tipped over. And he was just sitting there, very, very dry, and on its side. So what has happened, and this is very common with succulents when they get underwater, is that every node is trying to send out roots to find some moisture somewhere. Please remember, succulents are plants. They need water. They do not live on air. When they got to this point, this is showing quite severe neglect of this poor jade. That's my fault, I admit it. He was back on a bench somewhere, sitting behind some other stuff. He tipped over. He hasn't been able to get water because the pot's on its side. So it dried right out, like bone dry. And now the plant has tried to save itself by looking for soil to root into. So how do we fix this? Well, this is where we get into some pruning action here. We would do two things with this one. I would be pruning it first, and then we'll think about repotting. For pruning, I think I would probably look at, we've got a couple of good stems, actually a group of good stems here that are going to make a nice plant. This one over here actually is a separate plant, and I think we can probably take it right out and deal with it on its own. There's a couple of other smaller bits here that are probably plants that have just come from a leaf. Again, see, there we go. And I think this one here too, I'm probably just going to get rid of it. And these are all just from pieces that have fallen off and fallen into the pot. So this is where we're looking at how we're going to fix this guy. I've given it a soak. It still needs more moisture. Look, you can see how dry it was. This was sitting in water all night. 24 hours in water, it only moistened this much. This is all still bone dry. When peat-based soil mixes get dry, they get really dry and are really hard to re-wet. So you've got to be careful of that. For succulents, never a bad idea to add in more perlite. If you can get a hold of horticultural grit, meaning some very small gravel, you can mix that in. Look at some of the bonsai soil additives. They work really well. If you can get humus, add some humus in there. Things like that all add drainage to the mix, but they aerate the mix, so moisture and air can get through the mix. So we've got that issue to deal with. But for now, we're just going to start trying to resurrect our plant here. So we're going to get rid of some little crisscrossing branches. Open it up a little bit. We've got this really awkward one that's coming through way over here. We want to fix that. See this guy here? We want to fix that. We need to get rid of some of this side heaviness. So we can actually go back, and when we prune back, you always prune to where a node is. You can see that little line there. None of this is going to go to waste. Right back. And even if we're taking the plant, the shoot off to where there's no leaves, they will resprout. Not to worry. They're very good at recouping themselves in that way. You can see here. New shoots from those nodes. We don't want all three of those there, but we might leave one to make a new branch out the back there. I think I'm going to take this one off. And then we're going to reduce a bit of these. We've got to get rid of this big double here, like that alone. So we're going to put that back pretty heavy. Again, it's going to grow a new shoot from there. And I think maybe we will just take a couple more off. So there we go. We're back on the way to getting this guy fixed up. We'll probably leave him in that pot for a little while longer. Let it get some new growth. Give it some moisture so it's not relying on these little air roots for its food. And now we've got dozens of cuttings here to play with and make some new jades. We could even take this guy here, have a little fun with him. Some of that awkward growth. Repot that. We got a new jade going there. Jades are great plants. They're so easy to deal with. If you want to toy around with bonsai, they work well for that too because they make trunks very quickly. And they're ridiculously easy to root and grow. And we can take lots and lots of cuttings from what's here. There's our start for that guy. We'll come back in a little bit later after it's had some moisture, maybe a little bit of fertilizer. And get some new growth, and we'll see how it's making it. So there's how to deal with your skinny growth on your upright cacti and succulents. We got any questions for today?
No questions.
No questions for today. All right. We'll wrap it up then for this week. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget, all of these videos make it onto our YouTube channel, Mason House Gardens Let's Get Growing on YouTube. You can go there, you can subscribe, and you can watch the videos anytime. And we'll see you next time on Let's Get Growing.